Now we're live. Welcome everybody to Sweetcast. It's not really an impromptu stream, but it wasn't planned a few days ago. It was planned a couple days ago. I think I'm actually really excited about this because I get super dialed into my own network, like the same few people that I talk to about comics with. I end up doing streams, same people. And so it is kind of fun to pull in some other comic book creators, and you guys are doing some really cool stuff. So I'm really interested to pick your brains on some of the stuff you're doing. And I've got to highlight also a mutual friend here, Aaron Olson. There we go. Thanks for setting this up, Aaron. And we got to say hello to Cam 1138. He's in the chat right now. Hello, Cam. Always great to see you there. And we'll let some people come in. So our guests, I'll introduce them here. We have Robert Atkins and Quinn. Quinn, I forgot your last name already.
Johnson. That's okay.
Johnson,
it's a very generic last name.
Yeah, I was like, get used
to it.
I
could have typed it all out.
Yeah. Quinn J. We can do that.
That's right.
But yeah, welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you on the stream. So let me understand. I know there's a Utah connection. Both of you don't live in Utah. What's the
so I did. I grew up in Utah most of my life. Went to high school, junior high and high school in Utah, and I was there till college. Well, so then I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design where Robert and I met. And then I lived in Utah for several more years, and now I live in San Antonio. So yeah, I've lived in Utah for many years of my life.
Gotcha. Very cool. And then Robert, no connection.
No, I've been to Utah twice.
Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up in Illinois, just total Midwest, and then but I went down to SCAD for my master's degree back in kind of early 2000s, and then that's where I met Quinn. We met down in school and just became like good friends and started working together kind of post graduation, and kept in touch all these years, and then really kind of through the project we're going to be talking about tonight is really kind of what we've been kind of working on. We've done lots of other projects peripherally, in our own professions and careers over the years, but this has kind of been the main link that we've kind of done together.
Yeah.
But that's really kind of what, it's been kind of through our friendship. That's kind of, we've done this.
Nice. Oh, and I bring up Utah because I've never had people around me that are interested in comics. There's a lot of writers here.
Oh yeah.
That write, especially like YA fiction, like really, prolific writers that are killing it. But in comics, it feels like I'm in an island, and so the internet has been so big for me because just to connect with people, like-minded people. But I keep hearing about other people, and Ryan Otley apparently lives in Utah as well, and they're out there. But
Tyler Kirkham's there. There are a number of professional kind of, if you want to call it like mainstream, regular working artists and
Jake Black is a writer who lives there and stuff.
Yeah, so there are several, but it just, I don't know. It seems like so many are like New York, New Jersey, East Coast kind of area. Not always the case, but it is definitely helpful, and I love connecting to people that have some kind of connection. So anyway, there's my spiel about that. But so you have an interesting story, I think, about your story, about your comic, and so I want to talk about that as well. I did some updates for the chat, and C Money actually brings up a good one. He says Clint the Impaler, which is I am Milk. My last name's Stoker, so I'm just gonna lean in and totally milk that. So I'm doing a Dracula book.
Cool.
And so
the right guy.
Yeah. The first page today I've shown about it. So we've got that coming up. I'll show everyone that. Moot Point is here. No masks. Must not be in Canada, Australia, or the United States. 2 in a room. AL is here. And I think we're caught up here for a minute. So let me share my screen, and then we'll make everything clear as to what we're all talking about. So first, let me just jump over here to Twitter, and I released this today. This is one page.
Oh my gosh, that's cool.
This is Dracula. Let me see if I can there. That'll be a little bit easier to see. One page from Dracula. It's going to be launching in 2022. and I'm going to be releasing some more pages soon. This is artwork by Donald DeLay, who's done a fantastic job, and he's trying something very different with the artwork. To me, it still looks like Donald DeLay, but you can check that out. Keep an eye out for that.
That's beautiful. That's cool.
So, yeah, he's doing good work. I'm really happy. He's a pro. He does a great job. So all right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask you real quick. So what was your inspiration behind doing this comic?
Honestly, with Dracula, it's one of those things I've thought about for a long time, just because I started out writing novels, and my last name is Stoker, so people would always bring it up.
Yeah.
And I thought people would tease me about it in the chat, hey, about doing Dracula. So it wasn't really actually something that I initiated. I would kind of joke about it, but people would ask about it so frequently that I thought, okay, I'm going to do this and take it very seriously and do my take on it. And so it's really fun. I did a stream, it's been probably a couple years ago now, where I actually went through my genealogy, and I am related to Bram Stoker, but it's like comically ridiculous, like how distant it is. It's ridiculous. So he's like my 11th cousin 14 times removed. It's ridiculous. So I'm gonna put that in the book somewhere, and it'll I don't know, it'll make for some fun. So
that's cool. Well, the reason I ask is because I've been like a huge Dracula and monster fan my whole life, and actually a lot of the stuff I write has to do with supernatural monster, classic monster stuff. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Castlevania video game series, but that's like been my jam for my whole life. And I wrote a Castlevania 4-issue comic book adaptation that I was pitching. And then Robert did a ton of awesome artwork for it that we just pitched, and we actually had a publisher that we were talking to. And
we pitched it. We put together a full pitch packet to Dark Horse and Konami, and actually went through. Typically you would pitch it to a publisher who then takes that package to the licensor to the brand owner, the IP owner, and we went around the other direction because we went straight to Konami with it, and it went all the way up to the people who were producing the game, and they were all on board, basically kind of greenlit the idea. And then we facilitated a sit down with them and Dark Horse to publish the book.
Because I'm like, listen, I just want this to happen because I'm obsessed with Castlevania. So if you guys could just talk and make something happen, and we can be a part of it, that would be great. Yeah.
So the meeting happened at San Diego. This is what year? 20.
Oh gosh, it's been
13.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Something like that. And then they had the meeting, but the only thing that came out of the meeting was that Dark Horse had an agreement to publish the art books for the video game, and they didn't do the comic. We're like, what? We made this meeting happen. How did we not get the comic out of it? So we've got this phenomenal treatment and all of this concept art. But then one really fun thing that happened from it, though, was this guy had built all the sprites, and he made all the game. The levels.
Yeah.
So he made an NES cartridge game, like in between. You've played it. I mean, you can explain it better than I could.
Well, you have an underground game that none of us.
Yeah. It's like kind of like a homemade Castlevania game, and he actually made it into working NES cartridges.
Yeah.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but he talked to because you had done all this artwork for a pitch.
Yeah, for the pitch. And he asked if he could use that artwork for the game package art. And he made NES boxes and the stickers to go on the cartridges from the art we used for the pitch. And it became like the official art of this underground game. And we're like, at least it was used for something. Yeah. I was just so pumped that we
then he visited for a comic convention in Salt Lake, and he's like, and I have this for you. I was like, what? So I actually have that game, and that was fun.
There's like 25 or 30 of them made.
Yeah.
So it's really limited. It's hard.
Wow. That's awesome. That's a great story too. And then I think about it, and I'm like, so it sounded like Dark Horse was really they're the ones that put the kibosh on it. Like when you
it's hard to say. Because there's a number of things that were going on simultaneously.
Right. There was a new Castlevania sequel about to come out. and that was kind of the thing. They're like, from what I remember, they were like, if we were to do a comic book, it wouldn't be kind of like a 4-part story series like you're saying. It would probably would be more an art book to promote this new game that's about to come out. Which,
so you were pitching kind of based on the 80s older series.
Mine was like which so funny. It's funny story actually. So the whole story adaptation is one of my favorite games in the series is Castlevania 3, which, as it turns out, is the same storyline game that the Netflix series is based on. And they did a very different take on what I did. They did a much more like they did a much more like and I can't say too much because I haven't watched it yet, so I can't like. But they did a very much like R-rated take on that, whereas I didn't. That was a different take than I did, and so I was like, whatever, I was like, that dream is come and gone. But it was fun to work on, and I still have it. And it's still,
if you just quick like Google search like Robert Atkins Castlevania, it'll probably pop up.
You can see some stuff. Well, so it's been interesting because it seems like with older video games, there has been more luck with indie creators making comic books or getting rights to make things. I saw somebody that did a Burger Time card game. I know that the Contra license has bounced around a couple times between some indie creators. I
didn't know that.
And so I think they're more, and it'd be interesting. I don't know. To me, it'd be interesting to see something come to fruition there. But with crowdfunding now, it's like you could skip the whole dark horse aspect of it.
Yeah, it's not off the table, and it's not something that we couldn't ever do. Potentially it could happen again. So I posted some of the art on my blog a while back. So that was like my interpretation of death from it.
Nice.
And then I posted them one at a time, so you might have to go back. But that was like some of the.
That's Grant. Yeah, Grant Dynasty and.
Yeah.
Very cool. Nice.
I think if you just go back to just click on maybe like Google Images and then.
There you go.
Yeah, so that's a number. That's a number of them. The one with on the second row towards the middle is the cover piece without the logo.
Oh yeah.
Here.
Yeah, toward the right. Yeah, that one.
Oh yeah.
Wow, so that was the cover, and so that was like the cover for the game and all that kind of stuff. But that was like our pitch. I'll send you the PDF after this, but cool. So I mean, it was really interesting because that really showed us, I mean, a little bit of how a lot of this happens, and when you're dealing with other people's IP, like I had a little bit of experience with that working on G.I. Joe for so much and working with Hasbro for so long, but a lot of my career has been licensed property stuff, so it wasn't surprising, you're always working in somebody else's playground, so you never know, you never have final say.
Right.
It definitely complicates things. I've never worked with IP. It's funny you bring up G.I. Joe. I just posted a video today and I sent Hasbro an email. I really sent the email, but it's a ridiculous email and won't get answered. But
you might know a guy who could.
I can forward it if you want.
There's IDW is losing the rights. This is a rumor has it to do G.I. Joe and Transformer titles. There could be more. So I was like, well, I want to do Beast Wars. I want to do Transformers. I'll do G.I. Joe. Like, what do we got? Anyway, it was a little gag, but that's interesting. There's some fun things about it. I keep thinking there's some properties I'd love to play with, and at the same time, it's like it could really complicate things, like your story shows. And
there's pros and cons to everything about it. Like there's something so fulfilling and enjoyable about working on properties that you grew up with, that you have like a nostalgic love for.
Right.
And that's been a big part of my career, working on Ninja Turtles and G.I. Joe and Transformers and stuff like that growing up, and then getting to work on it professionally is a blast. But yeah, I mean, there are times too where I work on a Spider-Man and I'm drawing an issue and it's just the chameleon dressed, kind of imitating Peter Parker, and he's just a total jerk to everybody. And I'm like, this sucks.
There's like no action.
There's no action. And then you finally see Spider-Man at the end and he's just knocked out. I'm like, this issue sucks.
Like, what a tragedy.
Yeah, or I don't know. There's so sometimes I don't know. I did an issue of X-Men that was like Storm, but she was like made of energy. So Iron Man made a armor for her that was in the shape of Black Panther, but it was like Iron Man, Black Panther armor that was containing energy Storm. I'm like, what is this? I was like, this isn't X-Men. I'm like, ugh. So I don't know. There's times where you get to work on property. You're like, yeah, I worked on X-Men. And then you're like, what the heck is this story?
Yeah.
But the general public doesn't need to know the details. You're just like, I worked on X-Men, man.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It impresses. You get the street cred anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have any of that kind of street cred. I'm pretty sure I'll never work for any of those companies or work on those properties, but I still have a last name that I can just milk.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you play the guitar, as we can see from your
Yeah. And
automatically.
Yeah, I always have to disclaimer too. I just got done fulfilling 2 crowdfunding campaigns.
Ooh.
And so it looks like a disaster in here, and it kind of is, but we're gonna go with it anyway. So, well, very cool. That I did not know this. I mean, I didn't know much about both of you, to be honest, but this is it's pretty cool to be learning this. It's really fun stuff.
Yeah.
So
look on your Dracula comic. I'm super excited.
No, yeah,
that.
we'll definitely keep an eye on it, because I think there's I think one, it's just I love seeing when there's a property that's been out there for a really long time, like seeing a fresh take on it. And yeah, even just that one page, like I'm excited to kind of see what else you do.
Looks beautiful.
It'll be fun. Catching up on the chat here too. Old Man says, what era is the Dracula story in? Historical, modern, sci-fi, or some other alternative reality? It's just the title is actually Clint Stoker's Dracula. I stressed about this a lot because everybody knows Dracula and probably has concepts of what they want. So this is totally my take. So it's actually modern day Dracula, but there's a lot of old timey elements to it, and it should be fun. And so cool. Donald's doing a fantastic job with artwork so far, and I'm excited for it. So
that's cool.
Very cool. All right, so I want to get through some of the history here. So we have Elders of the Runestone, and I gotta right now point out that I'm not promoting this because this is you can't back the campaign. This was launched,
no, yeah.
This was launched a long time ago. This was 2013. 2012. Thank you.
So this is a really interesting story, and that as we have a product to kind of launch and to talk about, there's a lot of kind of messages to kind of get out. One, obviously, we want people to read the book, and we want to promote the book that we're excited about, that we've had in the works, obviously, for a very long time. But it's we've learned a lot along the process and along the way. And I think it's important to kind of point out that, like, we never gave up on the project. Like when a lot of people, I think, would have just never fulfilled, right? So I think it was really important for us, because we believed in it, and we were like, this is going to happen. Like, we knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So leading up to this, starting in 2009, we had started, we had graduated SCAD in 2004. Mm-hmm. And then after about a year or so, I was starting to get work in the comic industry. I was working for Devil's Due, and some of my very first work was for G.I. Joe. So I was working with them. And then I was just starting to get a little bit of comic book work, and me and Quinn stayed in touch, and I was doing initial character designs for Runestone, and as he was working out the script for it, and then Quinn started getting some writing work on Ninja Turtles and on
Kung Fu Panda,
for like DreamWorks properties with a comic publisher at the time. And so we were each kind of separately just kind of launching our careers. And then in 2009, we started a podcast together called the Dark on City Times. And it was Dark on City is the environment or the setting that this story takes place in. So it was just kind of what kind of bonded us is we'd been working on this project together for a while. And so we just kind of named that. And it was really just like review pop culture review podcast back when podcasts weren't quite so prolific and so much out there, but we just had a fun with it, and we kind of started building up a bit of a following as we were doing it and keeping it consistent. And we ran it for almost 3 years.
Yeah, it was like over 100 episodes.
Yeah, so
it was with my brother Troy. Was the third host, and
so we just kind of did a weekly show, and then in 2012 we had enough content of Runestone ready to launch Kickstarter, but we weren't. I mean, to be honest, at the time, I think it's safe to say we were pretty naive to like how Kickstarter is done, and even Kickstarter at the time wasn't very old.
I was gonna say at the time things are a little different too. Like we have the benefit now of seeing so many projects that have happened, and so you can generally kind of see, here are some basic rules that make it work, So it is interesting to me to look back at that time period. I don't know if you guys know Jason Brubaker, had him on the stream a few times. It's kind of interesting to pick his brain because he was doing crowdfunding campaigns a long time ago, relatively speaking, for comics. So you built up enough content, you launched the project on Kickstarter.
Yep.
Right. Now we had set a goal for, I think, 9,000, and we had gotten 12,500 or so, and we didn't have. I mean, we had pages done certainly, and we had enough for a pitch, and we were had printed up a mini kind of pitch book, that we'd taken up to Chicago Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And
which is funny because when we first started, not too long after we graduated from SCAD, we were talking about hey, we need to pitch this and have enough for a pitch. It's one of those things where, I got the first idea for this story when I was in 9th grade. So I've been working on it since then. Went to SCAD so I could continue to develop it. And then Robert and I met, and it was perfect, supposed to happen. And I was like, hey, my art isn't good compared to everybody here, so you're amazing. How would you like to be the guy? And he said yeah. And so it was interesting when it's one of those things where I think it was a story that we were so passionate about that we're like, heck yeah, we'll totally how hard could it be to knock out the next 2 issues in the next year if we just have we just get the funding from Kickstarter to finish off the rest of it. And it's just one of those things, and I've seen this happen with other companies and other people where you're so passionate about this idea that you, in hindsight, you're like, I wish I would have waited for a few more years when I was a little more ready. And so because people get tired of waiting for your idea to happen, and the reality of it is it takes a long time to get stuff done. As we can tell from our campaign, and it just is, and life gets in the way, and financial obligations, and a full-time job, which we both had.
So looking at it, it's like $12,000 at the time, especially, is fantastic. You did a great job. The reality is that so hold on, how many pages was this a commitment to do?
Well, the book became 144 pages.
Yeah. So it's like a full mini series.
So it's not just 4, it's 4 issues, but the first issue is 36 pages.
Yeah.
Issues 2 and 3 are each 26 pages, and issue 4 is 28 pages.
Yeah.
So
we know because we worked on each of those pages painstakingly, and we know those.
Now, the other interesting thing is, and we'll probably get more into this in just a little bit, though, is obviously we weren't delivering right away, and so we in general,
just one of your backers too.
Yeah.
I know it's crazy because in some aspects it doesn't feel like that long ago, and then in other ways it really does. We're like, oh my gosh, it's been so long. But it's one of those things where there are some huge benefits that it's taken us this long to get it done.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, all apologies to everybody who's backed us and who has gotten tired of waiting this long. Obviously, and so that was been our. Obviously we want it to happen, but the whole time we felt the burden that we need to fulfill for them, more than anybody else.
People put their trust in us, and it's important to us we try to be honorable people anyway. And so it was important to us to tell these people, hey, we really appreciate it. We know it's a pain, but we want to do what we said we were going to do and give you something worthy.
Yeah.
So you're talking. So how long in total did it take to do the book from campaign to fulfillment? How long?
Well, we just launched yesterday. Yesterday was our big launch day.
Yeah.
So we finally got the book all done.
9 years.
Yeah.
From the campaign closing to when it launched.
Yeah.
So the estimated delivery date was January 2013, and instead we delivered basically just shy of January 2022.
Yeah. So this is I love it because I mean it's terrible to have a late book. I have a late book. That's why I'm like I know that's like having a late book. This book is technically, we said we were going to fulfill it in January of last year, so we're almost at a year overdue, and that is that it just feels awful. But it's like one of those things that there are things that come up, I guess, especially anyway. So
my thing is now you can just be like, oh, COVID, you guys know, and everyone's like, oh yeah, no further explanation needed.
For the most part, people are super patient and understanding. I think a big thing has just been putting out updates on the campaign, and so they know that like I'm not in wherever I could be, like Puerto Rico or whatever. I could have just like skipped somewhere else, but putting out updates, and I think most people have been amazingly patient, which is fantastic. But when you look at the size of especially this project, it's like, wow, it's massive. So congrats for getting it done. That's huge.
Well, thanks. It was definitely something that we like I said, it's been my passion project ever since I was a kid, and then we've been very passionate about for the last many years. And and it's just something that I was like, you know what, I love this project. It's our passion project, and we're not gonna, like, this is one of the things that we feel is kind of a purpose for us in a way. And so I wouldn't be happy if I gave up on this. It's I love the story and I love the characters, and so it's
right. Got
to get it done. When we when we fulfilled this, Kickstarter was a different time. People still weren't sure what Kickstarter was. They felt like it still was just a store. Like, hey, I paid for this. Why don't I have a product yet? Yeah. And people still feel that way, even with all the disclaimers on Kickstarter that say it isn't. You're funding
it's not really a pre-order
the potential project to happen. There were definitely people who were running Kickstarter like a scam at the time, and so.
And there still are. I mean, there's scams that come around, for sure.
Yeah. So we were always aware of that. It was always something that we're like, we do not want to get labeled as that. And so we were always upfront with like, hey, this is where we're at. This is what's gotten done. This is why we have a big holdup, because we had things going on where, yes, there was what looked like substantial money for a campaign, but when you're looking at the sheer amount of work we wanted to try and get done, people are getting $9,000 or $10,000 now to fund a single issue. Yeah. And we got $12,000 to fund the equivalent of 6. Right. And now, the equivalent of 6 20-page issues. Yeah. And we just have 4 oversized issues.
Right.
And Quinn wasn't getting paid. I wasn't getting paid for any of that work. That was us. That covered us to basically pay an inker when I wasn't inking, a colorist. Quinn did all the lettering, and basically to help offset any additional print costs and shipping when it came down to that. But even in 10 years, can you imagine how much shipping has exponentially raised,
in 1 year, just the past year,
1 year,
it has gotten crazy. Well, and that's, absolutely. I've got a campaign. I've got a late campaign. We're working on it. But this is definitely the whole pre-order system versus, hey, we're starting a project. We need your help to start it, to actually make it happen. Those are sort of 2 different things. And I'm trying to actually transition to make crowdfunding more of a pre-order system, like a company might, where you have the whole thing finished and then you launch it and it looks great. It's sort of like at face value, but really it's a pre-order system because it minimizes the wait time. But at the same
Hands
time,
down, yeah, the best way to do it, if you
Yeah.
can manage it, because it takes all the upfront costs, the overhead, and the time to get it done.
Yep.
Which is obviously very, very difficult to manage realistically.
Yeah.
But if you're going to run the Kickstarter, then that just all you need to do is get that money in. You're going to print, and then you deliver.
Yeah.
Yep.
And in hindsight, that's what we would have done.
Well, that was the thing too. Is it's like I'm comforted by knowing that like people like Yacht Club who did Shovel Knight, the Shovel Knight video game, that their story is where they were like, okay, cool. This is how much we think mathematically we're going to need to do this thing, and then they were like, oh crap. And then when reality hit, suddenly reality hits, and they're like, this isn't like we thought we had a ton of money.
Yeah.
This isn't like nearly enough to finish this thing, and so they basically were like, okay, guys. If we're all on board, we all have to commit to not being paid for the like living off our individual savings and borrowing from family and friends to survive for the next like 6 or 7 months.
Right.
And that's what they did, because all these there's always like way more expenses than you're expecting.
And, I've heard of people losing their homes.
And the fan, the person who's backing, they just want their game. They just want their game, and so they may not, and rightly so, but they don't necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes, because from their perspective, they're like, yeah, cool, it's there, therefore I will logically get it soon.
Right.
But the reality of it is, so I was comforted by knowing that there's people who are much more professional than, at least beyond my experience, who also have struggled with similar things, and so now when I like, there's other games that and books and stuff that I funded or movies that are like being big high profile, and then they're like, you know what, this is going to be delayed another year, and there's some people that grumble and like, oh, you guys suck, you're not keeping your promises. And I'm more of now, because I've had some of these experiences, I'm more of the mindset of like, hey, you know what, you're trying to make it the best quality you can. I am totally okay with waiting. You're trying to give it the love. I'd rather you finish it and make it really good than release something at the exact time you said that's really crappy and like clearly not finished and very unfulfilling. But that's another thing too. And it's like, so like another Kickstarter I was thinking of that was very successful was the Bloodstained video game. You can tell I like video games. But the Bloodstained video game was one where in hindsight, I'm like, oh man, that would have been so cool if we could have done that. But basically they said, we have already made an agreement with a video game company that we have enough money to make this game, but so we're not completely relying upon Kickstarter pledges to fund this thing. They're like, we have enough money to do it. We already have a partnership. The game is going to be made, but we want to do this Kickstarter to prove that there's a big enough fan, desire for this to happen. And then that extra money is great, because we'll also use that to even improve the game.
Right.
So like in hindsight now, it's like, and I feel like I'm I'm not like rich, but I'm in a better financial position than I was back then. And now it's easier for me to be like, okay, if I was going to do a second Kickstarter, then I would do that. I would, do like, this thing is ready to go. This extra money will just help for printing costs, but it is done.
Yeah.
And that way they're not waiting on all that. And there isn't this like, oh my gosh, we still have to create, So, but that was something I didn't even cross my mind 10 years ago,
Well, and the conundrum is that the people that need crowdfunding more for the traditional purpose of crowdfunding don't have money like that, so it's kind of, that's a bit of the conundrum. It's like, if you have the money, you can produce it, but crowdfunding is still super useful. Even to, I mean, we've seen like Boom Studios run a very big crowdfunding campaign recently. So they're out there. So comic Ethan asked, what's going on now? What are they doing? We're talking about the book here. So this is this is it. So this is Elders of the Runestone, right?
Yeah. Yep. So this is actually some really exciting stuff, because this isn't it. If you look at the cover of the book, the cover says Volume 1, right? Very is that Robert Atkins?
You have a fan here.
Yeah.
This is my letterer, by the way.
Oh, awesome.
So it's
so if you scroll down a little bit, you can actually see the cover of the collected book.
Yeah. So right there. So it's part 1 of 3. So this contains the first 4 issues. Again, it's 100 and a short story that we did for a free comic book day. And so it's and there is quite a bit of a good kind of, there's a lot of what they call back matter, which I hate that word, but it's basically like extra commentary and stuff in the back. But that was mostly because we learned a lot about printing and page count and how many pages they need and all this kind of stuff to fill out a graphic novel, which was all informative and good for us to know.
Yeah.
But at any rate, so it is a hefty book. Like when you get this book, like there is quite a bit of
easily
content.
kill small pests in your house if you needed to.
That's a good feeling then too when people get that book that they've waited for, and
it looks
like,
awesome.
all right.
It came out looking awesome, and
it does. Cool.
Yeah, it's a high quality print job. We use the same printers. Speaking of that, IDW uses, so it's the same in general, just print quality. But it so we have this book kind of launches kind of the origin of these characters, the setting, the world they're in, and it just kind of pushes forward all of their ambitions, who they are, why they're even together, and how this world works. The next arc, part 2, right, we get into, and we are already well into that production. So those issues are already in the can. Like those are done. So we're like almost wrapping up the next full arc. But 5, 6, 7 are done, and 8 we're going to be wrapping up here pretty soon. And we actually have another artist on board. Her name's Naomi Sky. And
she's awesome.
Yeah, she's great. I think what we realized was just with my schedule, this is what the big holdup was. And it's just, the thing is, you just have to be realistic with, your time and who's working on it and just life. Like if you're freelancing, it's not realistic to do a creator-owned book if the artist can't get paid at least something, right? It's just not realistic because the time investment is a full-time job to get this done on any kind of a schedule. So I was having to draw comics full-time, which I was blessed to have that as a job and to be able to do that. But I couldn't produce Runestone after hours, after drawing 8 to 10 hours a day. There was no more time in the day to draw more comics. So I was just getting a little bit done. And it's not like comics pay a ton anyway. So it's like I was doing a little bit, and it just wasn't coming out fast enough. And then it got to the point where I was like, all right, I want to have a visual voice in the book. And so I was doing really tight layouts. And so you can tell like the storytelling is all very, very cohesive throughout. But we're able to hire on artists that we went to school with or that we met online, just people that I've known over the years that we set up with at conventions and things like that. So Dan Glassell and Dwayne Biddix and others that would do finishes over my tight layouts. And so that became a solution to help us produce this and get it moving again. And then I came back on for issue 4 because realistically, that's where we wanted to bookend it with my art. I think just so that I had a voice on the issues. And it is interesting for me because I drew the first issue 10 years ago. And I'm sitting here drawing issue 4 like last year, or, a year and a half ago.
Or finishing it up.
Finishing it, yeah.
Because actually, and that was one thing I was going to say was when we first started, like, we need to put together a pitch when it was like way too early for us to be pitching.
Yeah, we shouldn't.
Like years ago. And we're like, okay, let's look at the script that I wrote and let's pick some really cool pages that capture kind of what this series would feel like. And so there's actually pages in there. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about that too. So there's actually pages in there in issue 4 that were drawn years ago that then Robert then later on finished all the other pages in between, but then he also went back to some of the old pages and
I just
fixed a lot of things.
I was like, my art had grown so much, obviously in 7 to 10 years, just in that time. I was like, I can't put this in with the other pages. So I went back and redrew some panels entirely. And some panels I just either re-inked or redid the rendering at least a little bit. Yeah.
So it looked, and it all looked good to me. Like even your older stuff still looked amazing to me, but you obviously could pick up on things.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard for you to.
Yeah, it was noticeable. Like, anything you do 10 years ago, you're like, oh yeah, I was learning, So, but in general, I would just say like this is. It still has a nice cohesive feel in the storytelling, and we were very picky about who we picked to come in and draw. So I don't think any of it's jarring. Certainly not. I think it looks good all together. But then going forward, we also picked Naomi again, because I think her style fits within the vein of how I draw. But she definitely has her own voice, and she's on board really for the rest of volumes 2 and 3.
She is the main penciler and inker for the rest of it. Yeah.
What's great is so I teach at SCAD now. I'm a professor down at the Savannah College of Art and Design, and she was one of my students, and I was like, oh my gosh, she would just be perfect for this. So she's graduated, and I was like, I got a job for you if you want it.
Well, we both looked at a couple different people, and we were both like, you know what, like, if she'll do it, if she wants to be on board, then let's talk to her, make her the first one. And thankfully she did. And she's a dream to work with. Yeah. That's another thing is like, you know, well, I'm sure you know this, but it's like when you're hiring people to work on your stuff, it's like, you know, can they do the art? Do they have the skills to do it, make it look good? But also, like, are they reliable? Or do they communicate?
Yeah. And I'm
a dream. So
that's one lesson like I've learned over and over again is that an artist, not just an artist, but creative team in general, even down to the letterer. Yeah, looking at you, Eric. When they're professional and they get, you know, and they're on it and they communicate well, and you know, that's it's just priceless. It's like crucial to make it.
And then you want to be that kind of person too, where you're communicating well with them, and you're being upfront with, you know, pricing questions or whatever. You can talk about those things very openly. And,
and then you get the tendency, I get it, that you want to hire, you know, you have a good experience with somebody, you want to work with them again and again, you know, because they're killing it, you know, and that goes both ways. Clearly. So
speaking of killing it, I think this is a good part to bring up.
Aaron.
Aaron brought up it was fun because when we did the Kickstarter 9 years ago, when we were coming up with, okay, what rewards could we promise to backers for certain price tiers, you know? But one of the most popular ones that we got was, we said, hey, for this, you know, if you back us this much, then we will draw you in as a character, use your likeness and your name as a character who's in for like a couple scenes, and then they get murdered, and
then we'll kill you in the book.
And so like Aaron's a significant character in there. My brother Troy is in there, and he gets totally murdered, and like and actually, well, and then Robert was drawing a page, and I'm like, I saw a guy with hat and glasses. I'm like, is that me? He's like, yeah. And I go, and then I get horribly murdered the next page. He's like,
I didn't do it on purpose. So if you go to the Elders of the Runestone site, under creators at the top, if you click on creators on the right, so that picture on the left is the drawing I did of Quinn in the book, and it's right towards the end of the 4th issue. And I was like, hey, there's a group of police detectives in this precinct, and I was like, oh, that'd be fun to draw Quinn in here in this group. The very next scene, they all get murdered. And I've read the script, I don't know how many dozens of times. That's funny. And I was like, oh, wait, oh, crap. But I'd already inked the page. I could have easily have just, I don't know, drawn a mustache on him. No, not Quinn. But I was like, nope, this is it. It's canon. He's got to die.
It's more fun that way. Yeah.
Thankfully, Naomi drew us both in as a cameo later. So,
and the thing is, on the page where he supposedly gets murdered, we don't see his body, so maybe he gets away. Like, we don't know yet.
Yeah. Very cool. It's funny because I'm looking at this campaign as sort of a relic. So I hope that's not offensive. But it's just like, you look at how crowdfunding has developed, and now but that's one of those things that's still really popular now, is to have a tier where you can be drawn into the book and murdered, you know, or killed in some horrific way sometimes. And it's just funny to see that that's one thing that has been a mainstay in comic crowdfunding. So very cool. So I want to kind of talk also about I talk about this a lot, but you do the crowdfunding campaign, and it's, at least for me, it seems like there's such a, you know, you put together a formula for how you want it to work, and, you know, you have a system laid out. But then moving that from, hey, I want to continue to get the book out to people, to readers that, you know, are not going to go to crowdfunding sites. It's just not, you know, most readers, I think, just don't do that. And so to be able to have an outlet for that has been kind of interesting as I explore it. And, you know, I've got my own website, but you've got your website here, the book's finished, and that's sort of the phase that you're moving into is getting it out to readers. What's, I mean, tell me about your strategy for that and how you've approached it.
That's an interesting question because we're still learning. We're still figuring things out, and we're way ahead of where we used to be. Like we've learned so much, but we're still very open to, if people have great ideas, then we're very open to hear them.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've started doing with this, since we started the launch yesterday, is we're working with the MailChimp. Basically, you get an account with MailChimp, and it allows you can connect it so that when people, like with us, when people buy it on Amazon, then it'll automatically subscribe them to our future fan email, and they can unsubscribe anytime they want to. But basically, it's like, hey, you know, here you're going to get some cool promos of upcoming books, so that way we can keep people abreast of what's coming next and get them excited, and that helps with sales. You know, if they like the story they've read so far. Yeah. And then it's also a fun outlet for us to do some of these fun kind of behind the scenes Easter egg cameos and cool little details and stuff like that. So yeah, and we're starting with it, so we're seeing how this all works. But apparently MailChimp is a very successful marketing tool that a lot of people use, and so that's one that we've been using.
Yeah, I use MailChimp too. Can I ask? You don't have to answer this.
Sure.
Can I ask how many emails you have built up roughly?
That is, I don't know if I know yet. I need to check on
that. We've literally just started with that when we linked this to the Amazon site to be able to sell it through Amazon
and then Gumroad.
And through Gumroad to be able to
for the digital versions,
for the digital PDFs to be able to download. And so we've literally just worked that out in the last few months. Until then, what we've done is we've printed a relatively low print run, I think of like 500 copies of the graphic novel to fulfill the Kickstarter, and we knew that there would be extras that I could sell at conventions, because I still do anywhere from 3 to 6 conventions a year, and then so I can easily sell books off for the table, and I wanted to have them on hand to do that, and then just so that we, through the same distributor or warehouse, I should say, that could, on a small print order, fulfill our Kickstarter for us, which was Oxeye Media, and they fulfilled our Kickstarter. They're also warehousing the surplus books, and then as Amazon sales go through, they ship and distribute those for us based on Amazon sales.
So we don't have 500 books.
They're not sitting in our.
Yours doesn't look like my office.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. We were just like, we don't want to do
they shipped us a few extra copies so that I could sell them at shows. And we had them ship all the other artists who've worked on the books. We had a limited number of, because our Kickstarter campaign had ones that were going to be autographed. This was an interesting thing. We had them ship us ahead of time a print plate pre-cut. So there was like, how many pages were on a?
Just 2.
No, there's more.
No, it was 4.
Yeah, there was like 4 uncut double page pages out of the graphic novel,
like signatures.
Signature plates that we could sign, and then they were shipped flat. We would sign, I don't remember how many copies, I don't know, a number of
around 200.
Yeah. And then we would just pack that all back up, ship it flat. So Quinn signed them, shipped them to me. I signed them. We shipped them back to the printer. And then they got inserted into the signed copies. So then we would number them and sign them. And then, because part of we didn't have to do that, but we were like, no, it said on the Kickstarter reward that some people would get signed copies. And we are going to do that. So,
yeah.
I've run into like a few times where it's like I said one foil stamps on the cover has been this big saga for me that's not that big of a deal, a foil stamp, but it actually costs additional money that they charge you afterward depending on how much foil you actually use. So and then so now I've totally I do a lot of foil stamps, but and they just look great, but it's like the process of doing that, you think it's a little promise, but it ends up being a big promise. I think there's probably so many examples too of
You're like
just
foiled again.
No. Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those things where one little sentence and a reward
Yeah.
can come back to bite you.
Yeah.
And it's
we
not
don't know. We're like,
necessarily a
oh, it's
bad
easy.
thing.
How hard could it be to
Yeah.
sign the book and send it to them?
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but you just have to jump through a lot of hoops to learn the process. And once you learn it, it's, you know, some of it we would do again. Some of it we're like, it's not worth the hassle, but
yeah. Well, and I'll say too, like this is, and the thing that one of the things that keeps me sane in dealing with all these and then other various life realities and challenges is there's a really good quote that I think of all the time, and it was by Elder David A. Bednar, of when he's one of the leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he says there are some lessons that can't be learned; they have to be earned. And I love that because there's so many things you're like, you can try to fill someone's head with all this information. You're like, this is all the stuff you're going to need, and they're like, okay, but until like they are in the trenches and they experience those things for themselves and they make mistakes and they're like, oh, that makes sense, or they're like, oh wow, I didn't know that. So it's, I think it helps me not to be too hard on ourselves, because we're like, we're doing the best we can with what we have. Learn as much as you can, but just realize it's okay. You're going to make mistakes along the way. You're going to have bumps on the road, and then you'll learn with them and you'll deal with them. And don't feel bad for not knowing everything right from the get-go, because that's impossible. So
I mean, the big thing is you got the book done. You have, I mean, not just that you got the book done, but you're moving forward on more. And to me, that's such a cool success story to see that, especially again coming from a time when there wasn't really, I mean, there were comics on Kickstarter, but it was still such like a new thing. You know,
well, there's so many things now that like just going through the Kickstarter back end now of our and now they've updated a lot of the interface, and there's so many things now where I'm like, oh my gosh, that would have been so nice to have when they started, because they were figuring things out, right? They didn't know what was going to evolve, and so now it's like for each person you can click like, what's the status? Is it pending? Is it delayed? Is it on its way? Is it shipped? And I mean, so you can really keep track of all that stuff. Whereas before we kind of had to comb through everything one by one, and
you can
just stuff like that.
Absolutely. I've got a question. I've got to catch up on the chat here. Sorry, chat. But first we have Aaron in here as well. I'm gonna hide your face, Aaron.
Hey,
what's up, guys?
I recognize that guy.
He looks just like I remember him from the pages of the Runestone.
He's that guy that died really slowly.
He was such a cool guy too. I felt so bad when we murdered him.
I was waiting for that death. It was a good one.
Well, it's funny. We had another person who makes a cameo in there, and I showed him the page. We're like, check it out, and he's like, man, I can't wait for that scumbag to get his comeuppance. I thought that was awesome.
All right. We got, let me look at the chat here real quick. So here's a question from Robert Roberts. Have you considered joining Arcaven Comics?
Arcaven Comics? I'm
it's
not
very specific, so
so
that's okay if the answer's no.
Yes. I'm looking it up right now on my phone.
C Money says hefty, hefty, hefty. I'm going to assume that is not about my weight. And we'll move on to the next one. Brian Christigow, who I always have to say, he's such a good writer. I love his books. But he says, not to be all braggadocious or virtue signal, but I had to quit my job last year to take care of my mom when she got Alzheimer's, and I still managed to fulfill 4 campaigns. Yeah. Fantastic. That's awesome.
No, right? and that's pretty amazing. I think that there's a number of things to consider. And I'm not making it any excuses. I mean, I think that there were certain choices that I think that we could have made to potentially fulfill sooner. And this was something I kind of wanted to get back to. Two main things. One, I'm glad that, and I am very, very sorry that it took as long as it did.
Brian.
At the same time, it would not have been as good of a project if it came out any sooner.
Yeah.
We would not have had the same things in place. I don't think it would have been as prepped to do as much as we are doing with it. We're in a much different place professionally than we were 10 years ago.
There's so many things just in the last year. Where
you know what, too?
For years.
Ultimately, the book is finished. So you're good.
Well, the thing too is like, I mean, there's even just in the last year where we were like, okay, we're doing the final after looking at some of these pages for years and poring over all these pages for years, and me read just because we had the time while we were getting all the rest of the production finished up, I was able to go over the script again. And there were so many things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that this I got that because now that the version of the script and the dialogue is like so much stronger than it ever was before, which, you know, it would have been nice to get it out 10 years ago, but at the same time, I'm grateful that I was able to really make the story as strong as it is now because we had the time.
Well, and there's a double page spread at the end of issue 4 that I couldn't have drawn 10 years ago. I just don't even think I had the mind to, or I don't know. I just hadn't had the experience drawing scenes like that where I would have been able to compose that or do it, you know? So it's not to say like, you know, hold off doing your dreams until you're good enough. Like that's not the lesson here, but I just think that it allowed us to put out a product. Now, the other thing, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I think the book too it is also a product of the process that it took you to make that, and I kind of find that interesting too. Like an example that I've heard of is when Scott Snyder and Greg Capullos first started working together. They had a lot of conflicts. I don't know how true any of this is. That's what I heard. I think it's on a podcast somewhere, and that informed how the beginning of the story played out versus the end of the story played out. And so like I've heard examples like that of, you know, where the process, like what was happening is going to make the book what it is. So I mean, it is what it is, but it looks like a fantastic book though.
Yeah.
Too, so
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I think that there's, again, like I said, you know, Kickstarter, I don't know. It's just, it's really hard to put into context how different Kickstarter is than it is now. And, you know, I talk to my students all the time now about like how to run a Kickstarter and how not to. And it's so funny because I'm sitting here preaching like, this is how not to do it. Let me pull up my Kickstarter, everybody. And they're like, and I'm like, all right, let's get into it, guys. This is how you don't do it.
Yeah.
But then the idea though is that, sure, yeah, you know, I could bang out 4 Kickstarters or just anybody, and it's not. I'm not even talking about, you know, the comment that we just got, but I'm just saying you could run a Kickstarter for $500, and this is actually an example I use in class very specifically. Is that it's actually very, very smart. Run a Kickstarter for like $500 on like a sticker set. Right?
Oh, or like a Pogs and trading card set, something like
there we go.
Something like that.
Yes, something that you can fulfill, something that with your outreach, family, friends, your social network, you know you can fulfill, right? So you not only fulfill, but you can hit the campaign and fulfill, and then, you know, here you've got 49 backers. You're going to produce way more than the content that it will take to fulfill those 49 backers. So then when you run your next Kickstarter, then one, you not only do you have a fulfilled Kickstarter under your belt, but you also have surplus of goods to use as rewards for your next Kickstarter. Then you run a second Kickstarter for whatever issue 2, or you even preferably not a comic yet, potentially, but maybe enamel pins or something that's a higher dollar amount. But then you have your sticker set, your Pogs, your enamel pins or whatever, and you build it up to the point where you've got 3 to 4, 5 Kickstarters under your belt. None of them are you pushing for the $10,000, $15,000 mark yet. You're really looking for that sweet spot of, you know, maybe first is $300 to $500. The second one, $1,000 to $2,000. The sweet spot for comics, because we had the head of Kickstarter for graphic novels and comics come down to SCAD and speak to the students specifically, and said that the mean campaign that funds is the mean amount is at the $3,000 to $4,000 range for a single issue comic. Now that's low.
That's very low.
That's very low to get it funded as far as like actually, you know, for it to pay for itself. But those are the ones that are a successful campaign. So if you can get at least one successful campaign done, then it's more likely you can get a second one done, because that shows like a proof of success and a confidence in buying.
And you can build up all that audience who then is like, we'll totally follow you to the next one because we know you can deliver and we like what you've done. And
it's also much more likely that you're going to be able to do an $8,000 or $9,000 Kickstarter for your second one, right? And then you build on that.
Yeah, there. Absolutely. I'm a big believer in sort of that building method because I don't know. I used to think that to do a successful crowdfunding campaign, you had to already be a known entity in the industry, and like you have a name, and so that to me was always the biggest hurdle of how can I come out of nowhere and be able to break into comics, so to speak, that way. But absolutely possible. I know a lot of people have done it, but for sure, I think continuing and what's the next thing and sort of building upon it has been is super important. So yeah, totally agree with you there. And I'm totally joking. Well, I'm partially joking when I bring up this campaign, but this was actually my first test of I'm going to make everything first and then launch the campaign, do a pre-order campaign. And because it was so different, it was a really interesting try, and it was super small and everything. But I actually think that there's some value to that, or there can be some value to that. Obviously, it's not a book, so it's not nearly as I mean, people want books, so that's the big thing. But
see, but this builds up to it, and then these become those extra incentives for when you do put the book out. Then they become your stretch goal, all that kind of stuff that you can throw in.
Put them on your website afterward. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
merch for when you go set up at shows, all that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think and doing a series too. For me, I've got a series called Downcast, and that has been just every installment. I'm still selling over. I had to do a big reprint, and that was terrible because it's this unexpected expense. It's such a good problem though to like know like, okay, I have no more books for new readers to get in. I have to reprint, but it's also just this massive expense, and figuring out how to pay for it when everyone already has it has been kind of interesting. But yeah, so it's cool, but it's nice to know like laying the foundation to continue on. So so I think, Aaron, I'm sorry you haven't been in here very long. Tell us, Aaron, how are you doing? We're gonna wrap up soon, but
no, I was looking at the time and realizing this is going a little over an hour now. But there's so many good stories here, and I went to SCAD. I actually got my MFA in the sequential art program as well, which is how I know these guys. And I just happen to have a military connection to Quinn's stepbrother.
Yeah.
Small world. But I actually have eaten lunch with both these guys, or taken them to dinner, and brought my wife actually when I met Robert. And we were just asking simple questions. What is the life of an artist like? You know, how is this doable? Can you fit this into a regular schedule? You're going to have Robert on again, and Quinn. I remember Robert telling me about how he was supposed to babysit in the morning, and you're only getting like 4 hours of sleep a night. And he woke up and his kid had put glue all over the dog. Is that how the story went?
We were literally just talking about this the other day because my wife's parents were coming to visit, and my father-in-law brings this up constantly. I was like, why do you keep telling this story? It was when my son had just turned 2. It was like when he was transitioning out of that second morning nap, and I was like, oh, that was the worst time in my life, because like I was literally surviving on 4 hours of sleep at this time, and I would go to bed at like 3:30 in the morning, and then my wife would leave for school at like 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and my son, was like a year and a half old at the time, and so he would wake up with her really early, and then eat and everything, and then she'd put him back down for like another nap, and I'm like, perfect, because I'm dead. And then so he would just sleep with me for an extra hour, and then he was getting up, and he would wake me up, slap, and wake me up about 7:30, and I could survive on like 4 hours of sleep, and I'd get up with him, and then I would hang out with him all day, which was awesome, and I loved being a stay-at-home dad that way. But when he didn't need that second nap was the worst, because what happened was I fell asleep like we were downstairs on the couch, and I was like, all right, time to cuddle up for this nap. And then I woke up and I looked down at my son, and he doesn't have a shirt on, and he's covered in chocolate syrup. And I was like, wait, what is this at first? And then I was, this smells good, but this is a mess. And I'm like, I'm covered in chocolate syrup. He's covered in chocolate syrup. And I look around, my dog is covered in mustard. And then I look, and is literally eating a pile of ketchup off the carpet. I was like, no. I look up, and there's a stick of butter that was peeled like a banana and crammed into the TV, just crammed right into the TV screen. And I was finding like cheese slices stuck into like the couch cushions for over a month. My son had taken like a piece of ham and like opened up the DVD player and put a piece of ham in it and shut the DVD player like back in, and then like poured like Hershey syrup all over him and was like, yeah, and then just like, time for my nap, and then climbed up on me. The whole time I'm asleep, I'm just like dead to the world. And he was just like, he would just turn 2 years old, could open up the fridge and was like, let's do this. And then like got into all the condiments. He could only reach the condiments.
Wait, so there was no glue in this story? How did I remember glue?
Not in this one. No, there wasn't glue. Just condiments mostly.
Sticky
and
things.
yeah.
I'm just curious what the movie played when you put the
I know.
slice
Well, I
of
mean, he
ham
would see the slice of ham for a while, and I was like, all right, let's watch a movie or something. And I'm like, ham! Like, come on. But that's when I knew. I was like, okay, I've got to go to bed earlier or something because he's not taking a second nap.
Yeah.
So this is when my wife said, I'm not sure I want you to be a full-time artist. I think you should go back and teach for the army.
Well, that was just, I don't know. I just knew. So one thing I do tell my students, though, is like, if you are going to do freelance and you're going to be a full-time artist, that you have to know when your creative time is, and you have to respect that, and you have to work around that. And for some people, you might be a night owl, right? And so that works out great for you, but you do also have to be aware of, if you don't sleep enough, then that catches up with you, right? And I didn't respect that enough earlier on in my career. And it just, so you can't go on too long like that, or it just really eats you up.
Well, and that reminds me of another thing that it might be helpful for somebody out there that I kind of learned along the way as a writer is, and there's a really funny comic that somebody did, like a 2-panel where it shows like it's a comic convention and there's like the artist and the writer like sitting up there doing the panel, and someone's like, so is it harder to be a writer or an artist? And the writer's like, well, as a writer, I just write it and the artist has to do it. So if I'm like, hey, there's a huge army, space armada, whatever, then my job is done and he has to do it. And then the next time I was like, the artist is strangling him, like, I'll kill you, which is so true. And it's which is so now I didn't think about it before, but eventually I learned it's like every new page of story that I write a script for, I have to realize, hey, this is, at least 10 hours or whatever for the artist. And so, and plus it's this much money for the pencil, to pay the penciler and the inker and the colorist and to print it. So it's like all this extra money. So it's like, so it really helps, as the writer helps you to really be efficient as you go back to your script and be like, you know what, that's a fluff scene. That's a fluff scene. I could totally combine these into this. Mm-hmm. When we actually pitched that Castlevania script, it was interesting because the editor that we were talking to, I sent him the script and he wrote back and he's like, well, it seems pretty cool, but he's like, and because I'm a huge Castlevania nerd, I had like just put every reference I wanted in there.
So, it was dense.
So it was dense and there was a lot of stuff, but he was like, but I could tell you right off that the script would need to be, that each issue would need to be half as long as it is. So suddenly it's like basically this huge epic that I had written would have to be cut down by half.
You gotta murder your darlings.
Which was honestly, that would have
made for a better story.
It made a much better story. Yeah. So like the version that now is, I mean, it's never gonna be made, but the version that was made, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so much tighter, so much better. There's so many things I like read the extra scenes that I kind of like, that just would have been boring to read. Yeah. And then it would have been tons of extra time and tons of extra money.
Right.
So that was a good lesson.
Absolutely. That's I even was mentioning it, I don't know, it was a couple weeks ago. I guess I posted on Twitter, and it was in reference to me writing Dracula. And I'm like, I have a lot of stuff happening with crowds, and I feel so terrible. So that I'm like, let me go back. I have to limit these crowds, the crowd scenes, and then I need some pages to make up for it that are not. You know what I mean? Like close
up.
Like,
you want to kill your artist.
And so it's like I don't know. I've been trying to be so much more mindful of that, and and I want to be that writer that people want to work with again. So that's part of it as well. So, all right. So now I want to wrap up here, but so Elders of the Runestone, you're not going to be backing it. We pulled up the Kickstarter and. Because that's the history, but where you're going to be getting it is here on runestonecomic.com, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So go here, you can check out the art, join the mailing list. I strongly encourage you to do that, and then you can check it out, and then you can actually go here and buy Collected Book Run. I'm actually just curious where this goes. Amazon. I don't want to dox myself, but there we go. So you can get to Amazon, and and buy it there. Awesome
And then
stuff.
if they want the digital editions, if you go further down the page, they actually can buy, if they want to, they can buy each individual issue digitally, and they can also do the collected book digital version as well. So those are other options if they're not interested in getting the printed. And honestly, like when we run out of the limited run of the printed, it'll just be digital.
And we're currently shopping around to different publishers, and we're like right in the middle of that. So
you're not gonna finance your own massive print run yourself and stuff it under your child's bed.
Potentially, I mean, it's not
it's not out of the question. We're still figuring some of those steps out, but So actually, the person that added the comment about, hey, have you heard about or have you thought about working with Arkhaven Comics? We'll definitely look into that because we are talking to different publishing companies just trying to see who would be a good fit and
very cool
doing that. So
very cool. Yeah, so check out. I know that Aaron's been posting a link too. Really appreciate that, Aaron. Great moderator, and thanks, Aaron, for setting this up too.
Yeah, I'm stoked to see you guys talking.
Yeah,
we'll have to talk again too because we could probably hit several angles of things. So
yeah, absolutely,
that'll be really fun. So gotta real quick. I've got the Pog campaign. This is really just how you can catch up on Downcast, but we have the Pogs and then these wax pack trading card sets. If you want to get those, these are the most popular, honestly, the wax packs. But you can catch up on Downcast here. There's everything, including that big reprint I did right here, the 120-page graphic novel. And then Fatal Update. Everyone wants to hear a Fatal Update. This is the book with Charlie Snogans. And we are very late on this book, but Charlie's been working on it, and I've seen some amazing pages. I've always been pointing to people. I'm happy if you come ask me about updates, but I'm going to also ask you to come here because then you can see art updates from Charlie Snogans, and he's killing it as always. He just does fantastic work. So check out Fatal there. And right now, those are the only 2 campaigns, but I do have Dracula. This is Clint Stoker's Dracula with Donald DeLay on artwork and Eric Weathers on letters, and I'm really excited to get this going. So I've been working pretty hard on this. I know Donald's really kicking into gear as well, and I can't wait for that. That'll be sometime this coming year, 2022.
Quick question about that. I'm just curious. Are you planning on keeping it a black and white book, or are you going to do color? Because it looks great as it is. So I just was wondering.
Yeah, I wanted to do. The more I thought about it with Dracula, it's like black and white. So we really just leaned into it. We got the gray tones going, so it has a nice finished look, and some depth and everything. So yep, we're just gonna go black and white on this one. I think it's super fitting, and it's kind of fun because Donald's been trying some new stuff with his artwork. I don't know. I just like that he kind of went with kind of a new style I haven't seen him do before, and so that's been pretty fun. So, awesome. C Bunny says nobody ever said I gave the letter too many words to letter. That's true, but it's too many words on a panel. That's one that Eric will come and he'll tell you to knock it off. Don't color anything but the blood.
That would actually be pretty cool.
That'd be awesome. Then you got to pay the color rates.
It's true. It's true. I thought about doing it that way. I'm not sure. Right now, I'm actually really into just committing to the straight up black and white because it just looks cool. But let's see. You can do both, Clint. I am a black and white guy. Looking forward to this one. That's true. We could absolutely. So thank you, Brian. All right, cool. Thank you, everybody, for watching the stream. Really appreciate you. Thank you to all my guests, and we'll see you in another video, hopefully tomorrow. So
good to see you guys.
Good to see you guys. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.